This is a Fox News alert. President Donald Trump wrapped up a rally in Louisville, Kentucky just a minute ago after delivering tough talk about illegal immigration. Here's part of it.
One by one, they are being tracked down and thrown the hell out of our country, and we will not let them back in.
Well, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson tonight. You'll hear more from the president in just a minute. One thing you won't hear, though, is any mention of FBI Director James Comey testifying on Capitol Hill. Comey's testimony may have dominated cable television today, but the president did not mention it. We'll have more tonight on Director Comey's testimony. The FBI director spent more than 5 hours on Capitol Hill today, taking questions from members of the House Intelligence Committee. It was a long hearing covered breathlessly by media from around the world, and by the end of it, we learned. What did we learn? Well, exactly pretty much what we already knew in November. Russia has a decades-long habit of international troublemaking. They make up stories. They break into vulnerable Gmail accounts. It was the Russians, remember, who dreamed up that lie that the moon landing was faked almost 50 years ago. So nobody doubts their capacity for mischief. And yet in this specific case, after months of probing, there is still precisely zero evidence that Russian efforts had any effect at all on our election outcome, much less that Russian saboteurs collaborated with Donald Trump or with his staff. But that doesn't mean we didn't learn anything today. We did. We learned that FBI Director Comey is oddly selective about which investigations he is willing to talk about. He confirmed to Congress today that the Bureau is investigating the Trump campaign. That was news. And yet at the same time, he refused to say whether it is investigating felony leaking by government officials who destroyed General Michael Flynn.
I'm just simply asking you to assure the American people, you've already assured them you take it really seriously. Can you assure them that it is going to be investigated?
I can't, but I hope people watching know how seriously we take leaks of classified information, but I don't want to confirm it by saying that we're investigating it.
We also learned something about Director Comey's political views. When Democrat Adam Schiff of California asked him about Brexit, Comey had this to say.
Would they have a preference for a candidate who encouraged Brexit and other departures from Europe? Would they like to see more Brexits?
Yes.
Now, how could Comey possibly know what the Russian leadership believe about Brexit? Well, he couldn't without clairvoyant powers. As if opposing the European Union is the same as being a Russian stooge. That was the implication. But most of all, we learned about the current state of the Democratic Party. What's the clinical stage after hysteria, but just before total loss of motor function and unconsciousness? Well, that's what it was like for hours today. Consider this observation from Congressman Denny Heck of Washington.
Our battleships weren't sunk and our towers didn't collapse a la 2011. But make no mistake, 2016 is a year that we should mark on our calendars. And it's still going on. The attack didn't end on Election Day.
So this is tantamount to Pearl Harbor and 9/11. Keep in mind that Pearl Harbor and 9/11 pulled this country into world-altering global wars that dragged on for years. Did Congressman Heck overstate? No. Not according to his colleague Jackie Spear of California. She described Russia's actions as, quote, an act of war, and Vladimir Putin as a tarantula who ensnares hapless Americans in his web.
Now, in terms of trying to understand this, I think of a spider web with a tarantula in the middle. And the tarantula, in my view, is Vladimir Putin, who is entrapping many people to do his bidding and to engage with him.
Never mind that tarantulas don't actually catch their prey in webs. You get the point. Putin is evil personified, the world's #1 supervillain and almost certainly our next adversary on the battlefield. Congressman Joaquin Castro of Texas got so worked up thinking about it all that he read aloud from the now famous BuzzFeed dossier about Trump like it was a real document. What should we make of all of this? How close are we to war with Putin? Intelligence Committee, he was there all day at the hearings, at which he declared, I'm quoting, "We were attacked by Russia." Congressman, thanks for joining us. So we were attacked by Russia. So the real question is, how do we respond? And so let's get specific. Yeah. Do you think we should use long-range or short-range ICBMs?
We should use long-range sanctions on Russia. We should expand the sanctions that we have. We should continue to investigate what they did. And today we learned from the FBI director, contrary to what you said, there was new information that there are members of the Trump team who are under criminal and counterintelligence investigations for their role in Russia's interference.
Well, I mean, I was aware of that, and I think most of us were. But leaving, wait, hold on. I want to take what you say seriously. Okay, so I do. I absolutely do. You said we were attacked by Russia. That's not a small thing.
Yes.
An attack doesn't just invite a counterattack, it demands one, else you reveal your fundamental weakness and get attacked again. So my question is, Carrier Strike Group 9 is the closest to Vladivostok right now. Should they be mobilized immediately? Should we notify our European allies that their natural gas supply is about to be cut off? What is our next step in our counterattack?
I'll tell you what our next step should not be. It should not be a warmer embrace of Russia, as the president clearly has intimated he wants to do. The sanctions should get tougher. We should expand NATO's role, not contract it. And we should talk tough with Russia. And right now, we have a Secretary of State who received the Order of Friendship from Russia. Tucker, Russia is not our friend. And not just for Cold War atrocities, for what they're doing in the Ukraine.
Well, I don't think they are our friend.
And for what they're doing in Syria.
I don't think most people think they're our friend. I don't know anybody who thinks they're our friend.
We shouldn't treat them as a friend.
But we should talk tough in response to, quote, an act of war? In response to an attack? I mean, I can't imagine a more irresponsible response to an act of war than talking tough or doubling down on sanctions already in place or expanding NATO. I mean, we need a real response, don't you agree? A military response to an act of war. How can we do otherwise?
Not every action requires a military response.
Not every act of war requires a military response?
Yeah, so there's cyber warfare that you can conduct as well. But Tucker, if you take a step back, never in the history of our elections has a country attacked us the way that Russia has. It was an electronic attack. Of course, it wasn't by a bomb or through a missile or a bullet, but they attacked us and they tried to influence the outcome of our campaign. And I'll be the first to say it. They did not change any vote tallies.
But again, I'm taking you seriously. Yeah. They attacked us. You say this does not require a military response, but an electronic one. What would be a proportionate counterattack, which we both agree is necessary on the basis of your description? What would that look like? What should we do to them? Sanctions, NATO? Let's be real. What should we really do to them?
Well, we can squeeze their economy. That hurts them, right? Right now, Russia's economy is in a free fall. I think tougher sanctions should isolate Russia from the rest of the world. But right now,
is that going to hurt Putin pretty badly?
Yeah, that'll hurt his popularity in the country.
You think he's going to run out of vodka or have to move into a motel or something?
No, Tucker, this is a serious attack.
No, for real though.
On our country. That's why we had a hearing today. And when I go home and talk to my constituents, they want to know: are we going to do anything, or is the next election going to see 2, 3, 4 of our foreign adversaries trying to influence and have the most aggressive meddler get their preferred candidate?
I mean, I think it goes without saying that I'm speaking half in jest because I think that the description of this as an act of war is hysterical. I mean, I think it's lunatic,
it's a different
actually.
type of warfare.
But I'm just saying, you're a sitting congressman. You had one of your colleagues, a senator, Senator Cardin from Maryland, call this an act of war. The Russians are listening to this. Our allies are listening to this. I don't know how you can describe something as an act of war and then recommend in response tepid moves like, I don't know, sanctions. I mean, really.
There's nothing that we have more sacred than our democracy, a free and fair election.
My question.
No.
You're saying the term,
no.
This is war, and you don't want to do anything about it.
No, I do want to do a lot about it. I want to increase. I don't want to do what you want me to do about it.
So what do you want to do about it? I mean, let's be really specific. What should we do? I'm taking you seriously. What do you want to do?
We should increase the sanctions against Russia. We should work with our allies in NATO to make sure that they also are not as dependent on Russia for their liquid natural gas, which right now Russia is one of the main sources for a lot of Eastern European
So you would be for
European
fast-tracking natural gas ports on our coast to ship it to Russia?
Isolate Russia more.
But would you be for fast-tracking ports
to pay for what they did?
You just said you want to make Europe less dependent upon Russian energy. That sounds wise. Yeah. We're the largest natural gas producer in the world. So why wouldn't we want to fast-track those ports to make it possible for American natural gas producers to sell their gas to Europe? Are you for that?
I'm for doing anything we can to isolate Russia. And Tucker,
but again, are you for that? Because I know the Natural Resources Defense Fund is against that. But what are you for it?
Yeah, I am for helping our Western European allies.
Okay, you brought it up, and I'm asking you: do you really believe what you're saying? Do you actually want to make Europe less dependent upon Russian energy? I'm not laughing either. I'm laughing at your response, which is, you're saying that we should help Europe become energy independent, but we shouldn't sell them the natural gas?
Of course we should. And we should help others do the same. But Tucker, again, people at home, they take serious our elections. These fights belong to us. Republicans and Democrats can go at it back and forth. But as soon as an outside meddler comes in, that's off limits. And both parties should say, we're not going to tolerate this. And this is actually, I think, an opportunity for Republicans and Democrats to unify and say, never again will we allow ourselves to be in this mess, because this is a mess.
As soon as you define the effect of Russian meddling, hacking, war-making, whatever you're calling it now, on our election, then I think you'll have a chance of bringing people over to your side. What was the effect exactly? And I've asked you this many times, and you can't provide an answer.
Yeah, no, I can provide an answer. Russia sought to tear down Hillary Clinton and lift up Donald Trump. And our intelligence agencies have concluded that. I believe our intelligence agencies, do you?
So, I don't know. Sometimes I have a right, I think, as an American citizen to know more about how they reach their conclusions. But they sort of missed 9/11 and the fall of the Soviet Union, and so I think it's fair to be skeptical. I'm not lacking patriotism for taking that
But there's
position.
been no counter evidence that Russia did not do this.
No, but you heard the FBI director today say that Vladimir Putin hated Hillary Clinton, hated her. He personally hated her, and that's why he sought her defeat in the election.
How do you think he made that up?
How would he?
Or do you think
I don't know the answer. I'm asking you as a member of the Intel Committee.
Yeah.
How would he know something like that? I don't know what I think about things. We don't even know ourselves. How could he possibly know the innermost thoughts of the
Why are we
leader of
really
Russia?
here? I mean, you're
no,
you're
it's
trying
a serious question. Yeah. Why would he allege something like that? How could he possibly know that?
Because of intelligence reporting.
Based on what?
Through electronic sources that are in the public report that the intelligence community put out. That he,
but
through
there's
sources
no indication of how we could know Vladimir Putin's innermost thoughts about Hillary Clinton. And you're asking me to just take it on faith.
Do you think we should tell the world how we collect intelligence?
No, I think before
or should we trust the people who do it?
I think before government officials change our foreign policy and declare war against a sovereign country, as you all are attempting to do, we, citizens, have a right to know on what basis you're doing that. So if you're telling me you know what Vladimir Putin believes as a person, I think it's fair to ask, how the hell would you know that?
Well, again, we have an electronic source in that call between Michael Flynn and the ambassador.
No.
Right?
I'm talking about Vladimir Putin's attitude about Hillary Clinton. The FBI director said today, I know that he sought her demise because he hates her personally. He said that.
Yeah, I still believe you have to protect America's
You just believe him?
secrets.
You don't ask for evidence?
No, I asked for evidence, and I've received the evidence, and I've reviewed the classified report.
So on that very specific question,
you
are satisfied that he could know what Vladimir Putin felt in his innermost thoughts about Hillary Clinton?
Beyond a shadow of doubt, satisfied. That's my job on the intelligence committee, is to review that evidence.
Are you further convinced that Vladimir Putin believed that Hillary Clinton would lose?
Yes, I believe.
So not only is Michael Flynn clairvoyant, but so is Vladimir Putin, because he's the only one in the world, basically, who thought Hillary Clinton was going to lose.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, he thought Donald Trump was going to lose, and he thought that the desired outcome was to undermine Hillary Clinton, figuring that she was going to win, she would go into office so badly bruised that she wouldn't have much credibility.
I've heard that theory, and let me just suggest one thing before we go. Doesn't all of this undercut that theory? Because, of course, the effect of this, and this is the effect of Democrats, this is why you're doing this, is to badly undercut the administration of Donald Trump. This weakens Trump.
No, obviously,
this weakens Trump.
If Hillary Clinton had won, I would still want to punish the Russians for what they did.
If Putin is this genius spy master, why would he be behind a gambit like this that winds up weakening a guy he supposedly loves? This hurts Trump. Why would Putin want to do that?
He has a guy in there now who wants to roll back sanctions, wants to reduce the role of NATO. Putin is celebrating right now.
If Trump attacked Russia, would you be? If he said, you know what, I believe you, Congressman Swalwell, this is an act of war. I'm going after Russia with long-range bombers. What would you say?
Again, Tucker, this is not military versus non-military. I would say ratchet up the sanctions, isolate Russia, make Putin pay for this. But most importantly, in 2021, I don't want to be sitting here with you talking about another country that attacked us.
I will not take it seriously without evidence, but we'll still be talking about it, I'm sure. When Trump declares war against Russia, I'm going to bring you on and say,
bring me on.
Thank you, Congressman. Good to see you. Louisville, Kentucky. For when we go to Kristen Fisher, who is in Louisville, Kentucky. Nice to see you, Kristen.
Hey, Tucker. Well, this was quite a rally. As President Trump said multiple times tonight, this place is packed, and it was. He started out with the greatest hits of promises made and promises kept, and the biggest applause line of the night was for the issue that started it all, building a border wall.
To be a rich nation, we must also be a safe nation. That is why I am following through on my promise to secure, protect, and defend the borders of the United States.
So that's what supporters here wanted to hear about, but Republicans on Capitol Hill, they wanted to hear about another campaign promise, repealing and replacing Obamacare.
As we move toward the crucial House vote on Thursday, the 7th anniversary of Obamacare's very painful passage, this is our long-awaited chance to finally get rid of Obamacare. It's a long-awaited chance. We're going to do it. We're going to do it.
Now, one of the House bill's biggest critics is Kentucky Senator Rand Paul, and tonight President Trump had this message for him.
I happen to like a lot Senator Rand Paul. I do. I do. I like him. It's good. He's a good guy. And I look forward to working with him so we can get this bill passed in some form so that we can pass massive tax reform.
So the key word there, passed in some form. President Trump clearly leaving the door wide open to some big negotiations if and when that bill gets to the Senate. Now, the other big question heading into tonight is, does President Trump bring up the two big hearings today that happened on Capitol Hill? In the end, he only talked about one of them.
Judge Neil Gorsuch's hearing is now underway in the Senate, and I urge members of both parties to swiftly approve his nomination. He is an outstanding man from an outstanding family with an unbelievably wonderful wife.
So President Trump talked about the Judge Gorsuch hearings, but no mention tonight of the bombshell testimony today from FBI Director James Comey, confirming an ongoing investigation into whether or not there was any collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. Tucker.
Stand by.
In some form. The line of the night. Thanks, Kristen.
In some form. Sure.
Meanwhile, FBI Director Comey was not the only big name to appear on the Hill today. The Senate finally held a confirmation hearing for Judge Neil Gorsuch a full 47 days after the president nominated him to the Supreme Court. A lot happened. For more on details, we go to Trace Gallagher standing by. Hey, Trace.
Hey, Tucker, several Democratic senators have already vowed to oppose Neil Gorsuch and to try to block his nomination from coming to a final vote. In their opening statements, Democrats tried to tie Gorsuch to President Trump while billing him as a threat to workers and women. Democrats also made it crystal clear they remain furious over Republicans' refusal to hold hearings for President Obama's Supreme Court nominee, Merrick Garland. Listen.
They are arguing that the Senate should rubber stamp a nominee selected by extreme interest groups and nominated by a president who lost a popular vote by nearly 3 million votes.
During their 10 minutes of opening statements, Republican senators applauded Neil Gorsuch, calling him extraordinarily talented with the highest levels of professional qualifications, including integrity, competence, and temperament. They left out patient, but that was evident by the 3 hours Gorsuch waited to speak on his own behalf. Here he is.
I've ruled for disabled students, for prisoners, for the accused, for workers alleging civil rights violations, and for undocumented immigrants. Sometimes, too, I've ruled against such persons.
And tomorrow the showdown begins as Democrats get their first chance to question Judge Gorsuch. The chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Republican Chuck Grassley, wants a committee vote on Gorsuch by April 3rd and a full vote in the Senate later that same week. Tucker.
Trace Gallagher. Thanks, Trace. Communications director for the Working Families Party. It's a progressive third party hostile to the nomination of Judge Gorsuch. He joins us now. Joe, thanks a lot for coming on.
Tucker, thanks so much for having me on tonight. And first of all, I wanted to thank you for something that you said last week. You and I may not agree on a tremendous amount, but last week you were interviewing Trump about the health care bill he's supporting, now moving through Congress. And you pointed out that its centerpiece was a massive tax cut for the rich, for investors making more than $250,000 a year, and that the other side of the coin was millions of people who are going to actually lose their health care coverage.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if the tax cut's the centerpiece of it, but it's certainly a component of it, and I think it's an odd place. It's an odd place to put the tax cut, in my view. Yeah, as I point out. But hold on, I mean, I appreciate that, Joe. Well, let me ask you about the judge here, and I'm sure there are always things I agree with people on.
Yeah, and let me tell you why I bring up that.
I'm sure you have lots of reasons for bringing that, but let me get to the meat of why I want to talk to you, which is about the Supreme Court nomination. Now, I'm sure you don't agree with a lot of the beliefs that the judge has, but the core question is, can he interpret the Constitution faithfully? So I'm going through your materials to figure out what exactly your problem is with this guy, and I get to this. This is a letter that you all sent, your party sent to Democratic members of the Senate at the beginning of this month, and you said here, he has, quote, an extreme ideological agenda supported by some of the most dangerous ultra-conservative and white nationalist groups. Now, What does that even mean?
I think that this means that Gorsuch is somebody who's shown through his long record that every act that he's taken, whenever he's given the chance between siding with a corporation or a working class person, every single time he's picked the other side than I would have picked. I don't know if you were following this case.
Wait, back up here. So you said white supremacist organizations. I mean, you have every right to disagree with his decisions, but you're trying to tar him with the brush of white supremacy. And my question is, on the basis of what evidence did you say that?
Gorsuch is, Trump has this Muslim ban he keeps trying to pass. It's been swatted down by judges twice. And the Supreme Court is just one justice away from somebody who will overrule those lower court decisions and make a Muslim ban the law of America. I thought America was a land that believed in religious freedom for all people. And I haven't heard Gorsuch forcefully denounce a Muslim ban. Have you?
So because Gorsuch hasn't come out during the nomination process, I think this is what you're saying, during his own nomination process and attacked Trump's travel ban, you call him a white supremacist?
Tucker, I think
that's so
one of the
unfair. It's hard to believe you're actually saying that.
It's one of the core questions of public policy right now, is whether or not our country is one that it has a place for people of all religions, or whether Trump can be allowed to pass a Muslim ban. And until
But Judge Gorsuch is about to sit for 4 days, he began today, of his hearings where he can be asked that. But the idea that because he hasn't come out and said anything about it, and by the way, a Supreme Court justice's job is not to formulate public policy, it's to interpret the Constitution, as you know. It's not to make laws.
That's right.
It's to determine whether they're constitutional or not.
And he hasn't.
So because
he's fallen way short of the standard of saying.
Okay, but hold on. That may be right, but you tried to tie him to white supremacists. And I just want you to concede that whatever one can say about him or his record, that is an unfair thing to say, and you shouldn't say things like that unless you have reason for saying them, and you don't.
I think that short of him denouncing Trump's Muslim ban, he comes pretty close to that line.
So
and I
my
think
children haven't denounced Trump's Muslim ban. Are they white supremacists too? Is that the standard?
I think that there are a lot of problems with the nomination of Gorsuch. He's somebody who, whenever given the choice...
You said something appalling and unfair. Just concede it and let's move on. How's that?
Let's move on.
Okay. I wish you would concede it. I think our viewers understand, and you understand, that you did something that's indefensible, and I'm sorry that you did. But I want you to get to the core. Look, your point is that he's against working people, right?
That's right. I think whenever given the choice to choose between a corporation and a working person, he chooses the wrong side. I don't know if you followed this case that he was a judge on with a truck driver going through Illinois. I think it was raised in the hearings
who had to abandon his truck. That's correct.
A truck driver had to pull over, and his the brakes on his trailer were frozen on a freezing cold sub-zero day. To protect his own safety, maybe even to save his life, he disconnected his trailer, drove away to safety. In the end, his employers fired him for doing that, and the court sided with the worker on that, sided with the truck driver. But Gorsuch said that the only way he could have protected his job was to sit in a freezing cold sub-zero truck, potentially risking his life. So think about, Tucker, what would you have done sitting in that truck?
You're actually missing this. I'm not sure you understand what the Supreme Court is or how it works. I agree with you. Every person watching agrees with you. Every person in this country of 330 million agrees. You shouldn't be fired for leaving a freezing cold truck.
Well, Gorsuch doesn't agree with that, does he?
No, that's not true. Gorsuch's job is to interpret the law as passed by the Congress, not the court. The court does not make laws, the Congress does.
I understand
and
that.
If the action is consistent with the law, which is itself consistent with the Constitution, there's nothing he can do about it.
Well,
that's what the job is. Do you understand that?
It's a pretty funny version of the job where every time he's asked to make a decision, he always chooses the side that favors corporations or favors the powerful.
Why aren't you complaining to your friends up in the Senate, the ones you're writing letters to about white supremacy? Why don't you say, hey, pass a law protecting people whose trucks break down in the
the
snow?
court actually sided with the truck driver in that case. But it's a funny thing about Gorsuch's record that whenever he's
but in that specific decision, as you know,
there's another
Democrats who sided with Gorsuch because it's a question of interpreting the law. The same with the Hobby Lobby case, in which
the Hobby Lobby case, where he said that the right of corporations' religious beliefs are more important than the person who works there.
You haven't read the decision, have you? Because he did not. I have it right in front of me. He's talking about the Green family that owns Hobby Lobby, not the corporation, and he said that their religious beliefs were sincere. And you may find them Republican, repugnant. He says that in the decision. He said, all you need to know, though, is that they're sincere, and therefore they're protected by the Religious Freedom Restoration Act of 1993. That's the point.
Wouldn't you think that if Judge Gorsuch was just interpreting the law as an even-handed observer, he might sometimes, somewhere in that career, have found an opportunity to side with the less powerful, side with the working person instead of with the powerful corporate interest?
Well, actually,
and the reason, Tucker, the reason
in this
I pointed
case,
out
he did side with the less powerful person. The Greens, as you know, are reviled by all fashionable people, including you and Hollywood and Hillary Clinton. No, I'm just saying. If you were to do a poll of people making over $250,000 a year and ask them, are you sympathetic to Hobby Lobby in this case or to the federal government? I bet it'd be 90-10 to the federal government. There's no more unfashionable person than the plaintiffs in this case.
Tucker, I'm not talking about fashion. I'm talking about who has the power to fire who. And if you think that the employers and the CEOs are the less powerful people in a comparison with the people who work for them, then I got news for you. You got to
I don't think that. I'm merely saying that
they're not as fashionable.
That these disparities are addressed in the legislative branch. We pass laws. That's what democracy is. You vote for people to pass laws. If you don't like something, you change it through legislation. That's the whole system. But you don't want to bother doing that, and so you try to put judges in who will do what you want, affect the outcome you desire. And that is not constitutional, but it's also anti-democratic. It doesn't give people a chance to vote on this stuff.
No, I don't think that's right. I think that when you have a person who every single time they're asked to make the choice chooses the side of the corporation, he's somebody who thinks that the huge unlimited amounts of money that are currently flooding our electoral system are not enough. And the reason I connected this to healthcare up at the top of the segment is because I think it's part of a pattern where you see the Trump administration and their appointees over and over again siding with the wealthy and powerful at the expense of everybody else, whether it's their desire to roll back reforms on Wall Street, whether it's their desire
Joe, I just lived through 8 years of the most massive wealth disparity buildup in my lifetime under the Obama administration, where the overwhelming majority of the spoils went to the top 1%.
And Trump wants to make it worse. I was protesting it.
By the way, if he does make it worse, I'll be the first to complain. But I wish he'd complain when that.
I'll be emailing to find out about that one when you complain about the transfer of wealth up, because that's every single thing that Trump has proposed so far.
Yeah, we'll see. Joe, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much.
Actors change vote tallies in the state of Michigan.
No, I do not.
How about the state of Pennsylvania?
No, sir.
The state of Wisconsin?
No, sir.
State of Florida?
No, sir.
The state of North Carolina?
No, sir.
Well, that was the director of the NSA, Michael Rogers, during today's hearing, reminding us that despite the daily hysterics about Russia, there's no proof they actually changed the outcome of the election last fall. Mark Stein is an author and commentator, always a man with interesting thoughts. He says that Russia is fundamentally Western, and that means something. He joins us now from Burlington, Vermont, a fundamentally Western city. Mark, thanks a lot for coming on. So
this is less Western than many Russian cities.
It is less Western. It's pretty, though. So what is this? What is this about? I understand the political component to it. Of course, we live in Washington. I get what this is about, hurting the Trump people, fine. But there does seem to be something genuine at the core here. Democrats seem actually mad at Russia in a way that I can't remember them being. Why do you think they are?
Well, I think they're mad at did not lose the election, that somebody stole it from them. And that's why what we saw today, frankly, was nuts. I mean, the Democrats, as you said, they've turned Putin into a Bond villain, the man with the spider's touch, as that congresswoman almost sang today. They're two sound bites from insisting that they're going to build a new Berlin Wall and get Russia to pay for it. This is going nowhere for them. It's a massive head fake. And if you did subscribe seriously to the theory that Putin was trying to mess with America, what do we have now? We have an interminable investigation that is designed to drag down the United States government. This investigation, this furor, is actually doing Putin's bidding more than having some cabinet secretary in his pocket would. So today's hearings were bizarre in a very particular way. And when someone like Comey says, Vladimir Putin absolutely hates Hillary Clinton. What business is that of a domestic law enforcement agency? Why the hell is the FBI wasting its time trying to figure out what Vladimir Putin thinks of some washed-up has-been presidential candidate?
And also, how would they know? And of course, that's fundamentally unknowable, and you shouldn't say you know things when you don't, especially in sworn testimony on Capitol Hill. So what should our posture toward Russia be? What should we think of Russia? Those of us who are not caught up in that. I'm kind of agnostic. What should I think about Russia?
Well, I think Russia is fundamentally, once you strip away a century of communism, Russia is essentially the prodigal child of Western civilization. You know, it's Chekhov and Tchaikovsky and Pushkin and Rachmaninoff, and the idea that we need to turn it into an enemy simply because it has a flawed government, I think is idiotic. Mike Flynn, for example, I'm in favor of Flynn being gone, not because he has ties with the Russians, but because he was in the pay of the Turks. And I regard Erdogan as a far greater threat to Western civilization than Vladimir Putin is. And that conversation you were having at the top of the show, in which Democrats are demanding that we double down on sanctions, again, I think we ought to start thinking about this in a reasonable way. Crimea, I speak as a 19th century imperialist here, so Crimea and Balaclava and Sebastopol and the charge of the Light Brigade are engraved in my soul, but I think Crimea is a legitimate sphere of Russian influence. And the idea that Democrats are suddenly prepared to launch World War III over Crimea is completely preposterous. Where were they on this 40 years ago?
Well, that's in a very different place. It's also a little weird to hear people who've lionized Hugo Chavez and Fidel Castro complain about a strongman. So quickly, Trump's position, he said it out loud, is that we share a common enemy in radical Islam with the Russian government, and we can make common cause to fight it. Is that a tenable plan?
I think so. Trump at his rally tonight was emphasizing America first. Make America great again. Putin wants to make Russia great again. And insofar as those objectives don't conflict, we should think strategically. Russia, frankly, has had a much better track record in Syria. They've kept their strong man in place. We've spent 15 years in a ramshackle Stone Age basket case like Afghanistan for 15 years, and we've got nothing to show for it. There's actually, Trump's right. We could learn from Putin in these parts of the world.
Nicely put. As always, Mark Stein, the best. Thank you. Back to become president. Craig Shirley, it's great to see you.
Thank you, Tucker. Good to see you, too.
You've written a lot on this president and on this period, many books on it. Did you ever think that you would grow old enough to see the Democrats pushing for a new Cold War against
No, I didn't. It's a new world, isn't it?
It's really
kind of a new world order, right?
It's kind of a new world order. So the debate in the 80s, of course, the 70s and 80s always was, Democrats are too soft on Russia. That was Reagan's position.
Well, it's
wasn't
demonstrable.
It? Yes.
They were soft on the Khmer Rouge and Pol Pot, and were soft on arms control and soft on Soviet expansionism.
Right.
They were always soft on the Soviet Union, going back to, George Kennan and the famous excommunique.
So Reagan obviously hated Soviet communism. He said it a lot. How do you feel about the Russians?
There was no animosity toward the Russian people, and he really knew. He abhorred the idea of nuclear war.
Yes.
But he was obsessed with defeating the Soviet Union in a Cold War. But he knew that to beat an idea was with a better idea. He was once flying with Frank Donatelli over the Maryland suburbs in Marine One on his way to Andrews Air Force Base, and he was looking idly out the window. Frank said, "Mr. President, what do you see down there? What are you thinking about?" And he says, "I've got to get Gorbachev to see what we have here, because we have a better idea for governance. We have a better idea for prosperity and freedom and opportunity here than they have there."
So your book is about the years between Reagan's attempt to become the Republican nominee in 76, obviously lost it to Gerry Ford, and then his victory in 1980.
Right.
What did he do that made that possible? What's the lesson of that period?
That's what the book is about, of course, is that he took advantage of every political opportunity that was handed him. And, of course, it was a time of almost a conservative enlightenment was coming into full flower in America in the 1970s is that we were rejecting the New Deal, we were rejecting the Great Society, and then the issues, the Panama Canal treaties, Prop 13, tax cuts, Soviet expansionism in Afghanistan. The left was being proven wrong at every level. But, you know, you can't win an election just by being against something. You got to be for something. Reagan is evolving as a conservative. So by the in 1964, you remember the speech for Goldwater.
Of course.
Is that it was a great speech. But Reagan is often angry at in the speech. He's angry at the anti-war protesters. He's angry at the Great Society. He's angry at LBJ. By 1977, 78, he's now projecting a much more hopeful message, is that the answer is conservative. It's not just anti-liberalism, it's pro-conservatism. And this is what he's doing all through the 1970s. He's evolving as a conservative into a much more optimistic one.
You got to be for something. Maybe
yes,
that's the lesson.
exactly.
It's not enough.
And everything is centered on human freedom, personal, private freedom.
Right, so he had a framework that all of it hung on, and he was for something.
Yes.
Very smart. Craig Shirley, thanks a lot.
You bet, Tucker.
Good to see
Thank
you.
you.